To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world supreme guide of beings to be gained. Teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, through the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freed from attachment, through virtue, freed from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is a teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryataya. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Dik Songen.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, kange tuzi nyesone tawa tamje pangbe chirta be chene tenzeba. Kodam de la chasa lo. Oh yeah. Ba chunye kulu namjuna shira. Simje tamje ge tup tungege. Simje tamje tarbala tungele tarbala ge tungege. 교육에서 연대 군대지. 는 산지지 고바. 시진에게 토벌샤섬. 대체도 따다네. 대 톱시게 처리야. 처바다 삼바. 공배름 예주베 치도 추년게 인섬. 굴로세담네 사버추스.
So, to begin, to he who in his compassionate wisdom taught the sacred Dharma for the shunning of all views, to him, to Gautama, I bow down. And so we should set a proper kind of motivation, thinking that for the benefit and happiness of all infinite sentient beings, or striving to become a Buddha who has fully eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And so with that in mind, striving to attain such a state, think that by any means, I myself will become a Buddha by in stages hearing, studying, and meditating on this Dharma. So with that in mind, think that I'm listening to these teachings for the sake of being able to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Tita. Chunye kulung changja maro namjune. Sosu shogaya langidu inedra, kadu inedra. Tirinyi modelia. Chu kar kewa kar chiguna. Jimba tsudun soba samden shiro kandun chiguna karina. Titsama. Yonkusa yonde kundenji sanjeji kowanchi toba chigi. Techedo kyo rerene pa yonde rerene trupu yu samsa. Samlutana ne sanje kowan tobe. Chanjuga semji tsoje simne. Gyawalab chimbu yogera. Chunyemba chibu mare namjune samlutangura. Otiche.
So this kind of motivation is not just for listening to the teachings, but on an everyday basis. When we wake up in the morning, we should have this thought that whatever kind of dharma we do throughout the day, or whatever sort of virtuous actions of generosity and so forth, we are doing so in order to become a Buddha who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And so for that purpose, we are going to strive in trying to get rid of each of our faults and develop all of these good qualities. And so having this attitude of bodhicitta in all of our activities allows us to accumulate a powerful store of merit.
Oh yeah. Tanganzu de tsam doba lepte yoba. Oh. Tela memba chimbe chir saterwa. Oh yeah. Taya tende yala chungyege. Pangaje trashe sunamidu tishe kdwa. Tela memba chimbe chir. Ta marikba saterwa. Tome marikba sater. Memba. Sheje nezu ngune de shembalya memba na shi tripte yosa. Tegi memba shi mingda yora. Marikba sater tera. Yu kaya marikba marwa ko lokpa chirikine regi wara. Chinchi malokba de. Chinchi malokba tongi mesa tegi marikba asagora. Nezu ngune de. Tanda timba de marikba sonzane marikba asagora mada. Chida yu lokpa ina karana chida rete wara. O tiende tila marikba sayade. Tila memba chenpe chere marikba osche. Ne tome marikba sayade sigora. Yu marikba tsamla sigimare se. Roa. Ane yu rikba ke chinchi malokba rikba gejen sigora dokcho den zengi yuza. Ne ngone de marikba re se tunda tindi bashe. Ane ngobaran duche be chere duche namso sa. Iban duche yile de sigora. Mahobana kewa ngobar rabdun dubar chebe chedo. Le sakwa sonzane le sonza. Iban duche yile sigora. Marik be chere kawale so. Ora ngobar duche be chere duche namso. Iban duche yile se sira. Nabar rikbe chere nabar sho sumba namshe se dira. Chida yuji ngo zam nabar rikbe chane nabar sheba shagiyora. Yuji ngo rikbe chane ane nabar sheba ase. Kiwa langenge namshe sumba tisigiyora. Oya. Tenbe chere mingda su so se. Ete shiba ming su se dile yora. Tenbe chere se de mingda su mingi pumbu di soan dushi samba rekwa te himba. Sudi suji pumburwa. Te penzu chigi chile tembala ya koji metwa. 야, 저 델스기서래. 초안 도시 선바렉바 저저 유믹발 때네 깨고요라. 수지 봉부대 드레마부 초발을 때네 주고요라. 대차네 맹다 수세레스. 야, 티바도 칠랍잖아.
So here, picking up in the text, and I just want to mention that I'm going to use this translation that's in the book, but there are also others, including on the 84,000 project with different, slightly different terms. So here, beginning on page 7, with regarding that, because of great darkness, there is ignorance. So here, this is going to be giving the kind of etymology, the meaning of the words that are used for these 12 links of dependent origination. So here we have this initial ignorance or fundamental ignorance that is referred to as great darkness in the sense of not understanding or knowing the way that things actually are. So whatever object in this case, it's really knowing it incorrectly, misperceiving it. We don't know the actual reality that is obscured or sort of concealed in the sense of being like great darkness. So here, when we have a kind of misknowledge, that can refer to, it's not in this case just not knowing something, but actively misperceiving the object, incorrectly knowing something. So here, where it says, because of great darkness, there is ignorance, this kind of obscuration wherein we are not able to perceive the actuality. And then it says, because of accomplishment, there are conditioning factors. So this is referring to the second link of conditioning factors or karmic formations. And so it is based upon creating those karmas that we are creating the kind of seeds that will ripen in the future. So it's something that is conditioned. We're creating those kinds of causes that will lead to ripening in the future. And then because it informs consciousness. So here, consciousness is really referring to having that kind of awareness of an object, being aware or knowing an object. In this case, the particular moment of consciousness is that which has laid down those imprints. And then it says, because they support name and form. So here we have the form, which is really the aggregation of particles, various particles that comprise form, as well as name, composed of those non-material factors in the 5 aggregates. And so those act as a support, as a basis upon which one then continues to create further actions.
Oh, yeah. 시바 민소스의 민기 본부시데 민 소안도시 삼바 가서라 소안도시 삼바 때도시기와 수기 본부시 소보차야 밤에 구자를 지어라 남시 수사 스틸레스가라 안데 깨베 따티네 네 메기 나와 나도 주토 연구하라 담당에게 미시샤랍시 삼르탄들이도 깨베 거에 치레 깨치 주고 걔네 메기 원보 나외 원보 내 원보 저 투비용 거라 진대장 코텔이야 깨치스거라 유수들 수고 깨치 자야 깨치 트이 깨치 로이 깨치 렉시 깨치스거라 최기 깨치 투스거도 진나시 유 원보 투여라 메기 깨치 나외 깨치 내 깨치 르기 이기 깨치스거라 이텔라 때네 메기 넘버셔 나외 넘버 내 남시 끼고라 어때선자고 가서라. 계획 고에 실으자. 남시 넘버시바 계획 고선자 계시기도. 체바서도 sem망부 계도라. 메기 수그 계지 수지체라. 아니 메와되겠다. 아니 남시시 끼거라. 깨버라. 다 텔레테네 야보도 또본도 야보레 야보마레 삼상게 삼로망부 코르거라. 남시 망부 끼기도. 어텔이야? 체바스도 체바스 깨줘야 되서라. 삼로망보 개와다 메개와다 야보다 도 강가 깨쳐라. 깨치스기도. 야. 얘네 깨치셔라. 깨치체바. 공부 깨외 고예셔. 어디 깨외고 남버시바 마보 남도 담메다다 시바 상보당에 바 강가 깨외 고래다. 깨외 고예셔 깨치세. 깨치투세. 네 렉베체 렉바 텔레테네 유체 원보체 남시 숨부디 초소나 유수체 명화체 남시 숨부대 초소나 아니 렉바스밍다 렉방원에다 요마라 셰바가 틸 유일 렉야 요마라 디 촉바들야 렉베 밍다 렉바스 테바스 어 틸레테네 시바면서 가지지 두고 렉바스그라 테바레 아니 가도스 렉베시 렉바오세 요 테렉발레테네 다 초양그라 메기 직통 암저고 스타트 진놈 레샤다 테조 차네 네 초안람다 카셰 유디 소소라 유다 삼레 펜베스지 영소나 초아대와 용거라 네베스지 영소나 동해 용거라 개바 매버레 영소나 땅용 용거라 근나가라주 미래지 투네 미스스 나와드바지 통소나 펜베스지 초아대와 지거라 가바 맹게지 통소 어디야 오면서 얘네 초아동해 지거라 땅용 개바 매게지는 코카리는 인가 쳐서 초아땅님 지기도 어디서라 소아들에 이시바데 냠도 용거라 소소 초르다데 따다 남시네 가라서 삼려날 텐데 좋아라 가르따나 가리나 나라 펜바라 가르도 진데게 가르도 진데스로 소소 초아티도 다 따텐게라 좋아라 어디 인도자고 미기지 또 나베 타테네 제테나 남사 소소를 펜바다 내버르지 가르도 삼사 초아 용거라 쳐서데 초아데 어디래 아버지 두고를 왔던 뭐 초아시 말아 요에 체래 내 초라워서 유녀아 유데 미 수토나 소소를 펜베스기 녀나 초아데와 주래 네베스기 녀나 초아 동에 주라 처음에를 통해서 초아당 미기라 어디 봐도 찔라나
No. So here, again, because they support name and form, we have these two categories of name referring to consciousness, discernment, feelings, and then as well as karmic formations, as well as then the form, which is what is, in the case of a human particularly, arisen from the coming together of egg and sperm, the sort of physical basis for that person. And so then, when it turns to next, they are, because they are a medium for arising, or sort of like a doorway, an entryway, we have the 6 sense bases. So we have the sense bases referring to, again, there's when we have an object, then there is a sense faculty, the sense power, and on that basis we give rise to various consciousnesses. So it is a kind of like medium, or the entryway by which we generate all of these various consciousnesses. So here where it says the 6 sense bases, this term can also, again, the sort of source or the entryway by which we then engage in various conceptualizations, various other consciousnesses. So then next we have, because of contact, that's a little bit a little bit difficult to parse out there, but really here what this is referring to is once we have those 6 sense bases and an object, the sense faculty, and then the consciousness come together. So when we refer to this as contact, we have to be clear that it's really the sort of aggregating, they're coming together in order to experience an object. It's not as though our consciousness can actually touch objects, but really this is a name that is given to those things coming together, the object, the sense power, and then giving rise to a consciousness. And so on that basis, we then have feeling. So because of thirst, craving. So here, where, and I'm not sure exactly. It seems as though there maybe is missing actually in here because of experience feeling. So here, when on the basis of then contact, we give rise to various feelings on the basis of seeing something that appears pleasant to us or something that we think is going to benefit us. We have a pleasurable kind of a feeling. When something appears adverse to us, something that is kind of unattractive, we feel a sort of aversion and animosity animosity toward that. And when there is an object that appears neither sort of pleasant or unpleasant, we have a kind of neutral feeling. So whatever we interact with, we are largely driven by our feelings. When something appears to us as beneficial, we want to have that. We feel a kind of attachment to it, a craving for it. And when we feel that something will do us harm, we give rise to a kind of aversion. So I do believe that there is something missing here, because it actually in the Tibetan says because of experiencing feeling, and it seems as though that's not here.
Oh yeah, that's how I don't get on your kid. And it goes to the do so, but so give us seven gigara. Caresne you so now and daughter, so at the vacation. So Tati wrote a cartona, so at the vacation. Italiaco Chaba Seba Kiguara, Geba Seba said. Otelapa Sam Shu don't get a city of what was some jet. You shan't a medical Hagbarpa, change Chabat Kiguara. Oti and Ducasura, Seba Sigora. Combecher Sebas, Combas Chabal Sigara, and a Seba Sebas. And a you are Lembecher. Seba Kesona, Tichelia, Gabaseba Kuba Lembarwa, Lembade Carsigresana, Yawa Lembecher, Chakbe Yudi round the Tobiata, did a tiny butcher, Hagbar do Chabadi Gora, Tambu Chabara, or Tiabudu, some Jesus of Koyachi Tora, Etene, the Hagbar Chaba, Shenja Shuk Chirudra, the Lembasura, Gabaseba Kuba Lemba, you guys Shenja in Bachibur, Chaba in Bachibura. Oh, you want Lembecher Ragba also. The Soa Tungera Chonsona, Tungeta Jana, some Sebakigura. The Wa Chonsona, the Wata Mendana, some Sebakigra. Oh, the Tanium Registration, and it's Chagbata, Tundre Membership, Timukora Kigura, Namjunashi, Maripata Karichak and Kia Koki de Yora. And a cover source. You are Lembeches, Chagway, you the Tobia Tandala, Shenja Shuk Chirudra. You are Lemba, young Siba, Kuba Lembarwa, Tachuba Siba Ledera, young Siba, Devish Siba, Tandangazu, Messagura, young Kawachima, Leagarwa, young Siba Kibesher, Chuba Siba Les, Chuba Siba Les, even Duji Les, Sasha Yorwa, Keba Seba, the Kuba Lembani, the lady, Shuk Chambusugura. Sabu Tabshabatele Chutan, Shichapa, Shuchambusugura Mato. Le Saba Shantacha Sayake Omare. Even Dujigi Lesa Shabati, Keba Seba the Kube Lembea, Shuchurtagiora. Coleso. Yes, Casera. Lembasera, Kubelema. Young Siba Kevich Sibas. Chuba Siba de la Siba Sude Quadra, Quadra Siba Quasigua. T. Minta Yora, led the guitar, never to judge any Kawachimati, Layak Be led never to judge the Sombasonza. Chuba Sibe Les Shara, Siba Kawachima Layag, Siba Kawatera, or Til Layag led never to judge Sonza, led the Chuba Sibe Migtashara, Chuba Sibe Les Shara. Or did you love?
So again, based upon feeling, and just to read from a different translation, we could say sensation or feeling in the sense of experience. And so feeling, whatever feeling we give rise to, pleasurable, or painful, or sort of neutral, when we have something that we feel attraction to, attachment arises for that. So here where it says, because of thirst, craving. So here, when we have the feeling, then there's a kind of projection or an intensification of that, a kind of attachment that arises that gives strength to us. So when we have this sort of craving, this grasping for something, again, it says because of thirst, or in the sense of thirst, wanting to have something, there is this kind of factor of craving. And when that intensifies, the next of those is because of attachment, grasping. So here, when we have that initial based upon the feeling, a kind of desire to have a particular object, or maybe it's a desire to be freed from a kind of suffering, in the context of a neutral sort of feeling, it still gives rise to that kind of continual ignorance. That craving, that desire for that object, when it intensifies, then becomes grasping, actually like pursuing, getting that thing, having that kind of object, wanting to get that. So then, because it produces rebirth, becoming. So here we are in one life now where we have created various karmic formations, and becoming is really the name that is given to that karma, which has been nurtured, fostered, such that it has the potency to give rise to renewed rebirth. So it's not as though this is a newly created karma, but rather the second link of karmic formations. We've already created that karma, but that increase is sort of potent when it becomes potent such that it can produce a renewed rebirth within samsara. So this word that here is being translated as becoming, it could be existence as well, is actually a name for samsara. And so when we give the name of the result to the cause, this is how the 10th link of becoming is really referring to that karma which has the potency to bring about further rebirth.
Oh yeah. That's it. I'm going to oh, the Shilam number. Penangazo Shigalamurachina. Geva Seba to do. She so. Tanda Toya Yabata Messi Tena, Samsa, Mendeva Chitena, Samsa Seba Yungara. In Seba de Ko Shuk Chirachine, Tanda Chi, Toya Yuna, Chichi Yuna, Kanga, the Nimdo Tena, Samsa, Samla Kogara. Or this Seba Sigara, Lambasgo, Shuk Chirugara. Or the Chigalamati Shisha Shigara, Ting any Seba the Lemba Mambo Yora Yoda. Oh, yeah. That didn't go out.
No.
풍분 중화를 교화치만 풍부도 깨그라. 대선자 제일 교화서 그래. 풍부 중에 제일 교화오세. 밀리 깨나 가봤겠네 실게도라. 풍부 민배실 풍부 중산에다 풍부 야체를 제체도라. 저런 로체만에 민신도 민식도 신도 민번하시 고 야견도에 저대 가제 친사데 친네. 나마 사회다 그에 맞던 드레 매버til레서나 내 개바스 거라. 가와스 개바스 개도 그래서 가서라 풍부 민배체래 가와스 가와다 개바스야들 개샤세데 야견 드레마스 마 그에 고추선에 개바용 거라 아니 개와체 직배체서 다 풍부 직도라 소보데다 셈니데 저와 매바샤데 소보데게 셈게 리하 땡체네 로바치기요 말 제마동게 샤라 인터 르다 셈카가 도서네 치와세 그래서 아니 가와도서 풍부 멤베치를 가와 직배치를 치와오서래 다디 치갈람몰에네 가령 그래서 야 셈데다 tin데 용구로 하치다 냥에다 맹가 dom방엘에 요르다 다디 치갈람모티 셰기오라 냥에 제배치를 냥에로서 셈데치기라 네 세계 매회체 셈대체네 카네네 카셰 두게네 겹게지만 무시하시라 네 맹아 좀 봐시도 룰라네베chen 룰 나서르네 룰 때용마도 네 셈게 셈대체나 이 메테와시라 르지 동에들 거치다 메테와시 동에시 이게 삼르타니아 소소소소 동에 망아체 삼르코기라 르진 나서르제 호텔에 이 메테와시 네 녀몬바스 그래서 이 메테와다 축바 남중한 주로 축바셔야 축바자야 되장자 말에 심초도야들 근데 건동아제 지지마서 삼로마보코네 심초도야셔라 호텔에서라 녀몬바 Yamamba actually took by us. What did you love now?
No. So here, this is really referring particularly to at the time of death. So again, in the context of becoming, this is like the karmic formation that was created in the second link is like a seed, and it is like watered by craving and grasping, which in turn creates this kind of potency at that time. So at the time of death, we might feel this kind of like craving and grasping. So here in the 12 links, it's particularly referring to that point where when we are facing death, we might have this kind of attachment to the things, like wanting to stay where we are, wanting to hold on to the things that are around us, the people, our own body, and so forth. And so that kind of craving for existence particularly leads to the ripening of those karmic formations that have been previously created, or sort of bringing them to their potency. So then it says, because it produces, because of the arising of the aggregation, birth. So here, birth occurs when these aggregates then arise or come into being, are formed, are established. And so that link, the 11th link of birth, is particularly referring to the arising of a new aggregate, a set of aggregates. And then because of the maturation of the aggregation, aging. So from the point that those aggregates are established, they begin to sort of like ripen or age. This is the sense of kind of like declining. They're not getting better, but rather they are aging and sort of going into decrepitude. And then the next of these, because of its disintegration, death. At the time of death, this is when the body and mind separate, in the sense that the body is no longer a suitable support for consciousness. And thereby, this kind of separation between the disintegration of that aggregation of body and mind then refers to death. And here again, in this context, these are referring to at the time of death, like in the case of craving and grasping. Although we have craving and grasping throughout our life, in particular, this is that occurs at that time of death. And so too, when we get into these next, because it causes sorrow. So at the time when we are facing that kind of disintegration of the aggregates, facing death, there is that kind of sorrow, that sense of being depressed or overwhelmed. And because of laments with words, lamentations. So some may begin using their verbal expressions to express that kind of discontent and unhappiness. So lamentations. And then it continues saying, because of harm to the body, misery. So here we have both a kind of physical misery, the sort of physical suffering that one undergoes, as well as because of harm to the mind, unhappiness. So there is both a kind of physical suffering as well as the mental unhappiness that arises from that. And then it says, because of defilement, conflict. Now here, this word conflict can refer to an actual sort of like physical fighting, but this is more in this context referring to the internal disturbance of the mind. It's not external necessarily, but rather the kind of internal disturbance or conflict that occurs because of defilement within the mind.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is Karsura. Namju Samlutan to Lola Meteo Mana, Samlutana Yabura. Karisamtan Gurasana. Oh, Tati Tanda Yabujate or the Nimachi Kanga Shire is a chakbe you to Shenja Chorutana Tanda Yabura. Tete Shire Chimati Tire Samane Semja Namirachina Tanda Tetu Yabuche Gures and Nimachi Kaga Dre Samsa Samlutan is similar meta manner. Jovacha Yankasha Semper Biju Mana Samatan Karisido Mashesido Tisane. When the Shabachani Shekuyora, Kangashaya yin some tambune loves some tashana, Lu Yanjane Shire are samsa, Chen any teacher, Kanga, Namina, Kanga, Nimaji Kagadu, Tanda, Yabute, Yabute, or Yabuda, some Tangura. No longer than Lu Shenda Kari, Netazukanga, Kate, someone, Zambul, someone made some Tara, so Chibu Maruako, Rangshin Dera. Titanda Samlutana Chama. And 톱자고자 남주제 상을 매버체 니마치 톱자고자 존나네 선범메제 시라차그라 따대 영에 예섬들이 마중 야고래 섬 영원의 최바이네 마니에도 섬다 야라데 따들이야 나고심에도 야라야 조야부 좋아 섬가 공그르시라 어디서를 섬르다는 또즈 섬을 교난데 또즈 연나야부여라 양제 섬을 교시라체 민지 샤그네 양 양가 유샤네 야야야라 어디인도 가르쳐오라 아주 또서 교나를 지으는 아주 샹야 동해 연대에서 봐 교회 작바세와시 나게다 tin데시다 용말에 과발니 지지 소소로 보다 강가 tin데레 아섬 잠바다 저와 패에 출연도요라 근데 교와 두벨 가보용 그래 득바바 득바 득바를 마치 섬체 호텔에 삼로 망아 숙체 용거라 디지랍야 한데
So here at the time of death, there is going to be, as it describes, there could be some mental kind of unhappiness. However, if we take the time to actually reflect upon this before we meet death, before we have to face this, by reflecting that like, well, I'm going to leave all of this behind, all of the friends and family, all of the people that I love, even right down to like all of the possessions that I have, even down to my body. I'm going to have to separate with all of this at the time of death. And there's some that maybe don't want to think about this. They think like, oh, that's depressing, or they don't want to know about it. But we really need to understand this, that at the time of death, we are going to lose everything, have to give up everything, including even our body. And so we should recognize too, this isn't a unique experience. This is something that everybody is subject to. And so right now, while we have these like good kind of conditions, we should take some time to reflect upon what will happen at death and the kind of reality of that. Because if we avoid thinking about this our whole life and then suddenly are facing death without having prepared at all, then that will be really scary. That's going to bring up a lot of unhappiness, a lot of craving, and so forth. But if we have this kind of awareness that, yes, we are going to have to die, we're going to have to give up all of our friends, our family, our possessions, our body even, then by reflecting on this on like a daily basis, we can actually feel a kind of joy, gratitude that we have the life right now. Today, I have this day. May I use this well? And so here, if there is the kind of danger or in thinking about this, one is just getting depressed, like, oh, I'm going to die, and that kind of is overwhelming, then maybe it's better not to think about it. But there are really good reasons to reflect upon death in order to, as it explains, like this eliminates the kind of like pride and arrogance of thinking that we are above those sorts of things. It also helps us to generate compassion for other sentient beings who are in the same kind of situation. We are all subject to facing death. And so too, it makes us more sort of driven to engage in virtuous activities. We see the importance of really making an effort at virtue while we have the time. So here, reflecting upon death and the kind of situation that we will face is not something that should just drag us down into depression, but could actually be useful in order for our pursuit of virtue and making our life meaningful.
Oh yeah. Tadi yang tira shegora. Kaisore. Te kona meshe bane. Te kona metoshe meshe de barik bawase. Ore ta alen de chishena. Tanga zo de kam sum yora, de kam sumi kam se sum yora. De be kam se de ngara zo meta tondo ta ane lai yora dola ritus de be kam ya lai ri yora. De ngam ba se yora. Oh, te le kaisore ngazo suta te ro de chala soba te solia de ba she chebu yonge se ba she chebu yonge ka tam chi yora. Te le de ngam ba se yora. Tine sungam ba se yora. Sungam ba se de tingin komne ni ya kewa lang ya yora. Sungam se lare ta. Yarazu na shimara lara che. Te le tingin komne. Samde tangbo niba sumba shiba she nero rinba kashe she wara. Tila sungam bel hasura. Su ngarazu na shitinde sakje nyelenji pongbu ka sura. Tita re de shata riba da tinde tira memba she. 류도수 약부치 대용교하라. 순간 바세죠. 근데 숨이 감시요래. 소부 맹갱기 심지어 리시요래. 소부 매가셔 심다 소화단 두시대 검셔지 있겠는 마다 깨요 말해. 어디 감숨요라. 영감 숨이 감숨요라. 영감 들이야 아는 여와이다 전주미 dollar 주세대 용거라. 어디를 깨지게 여와이다 전주도를 깨지게 레들이야. 소나 모임벨레스 거라. 미게 와라. 센디 단다라지 주에 단다리 셴라 콘도당아제다 타도다 벤조 요에다 치틴데시네 센디 소소 야고 요에 단다 티바사비와라 센디 단다 산로마단다 티바사야스 요마라 자 센디 단다 테 단다 주에 단다리아 미게벨레사 요라 예소냐와 예다 단돌리게 레데 미게와 주데라 소데 근데 체대던다 계속 시작하는 소소던다 계속 시작이라 참아치에도 소소 가면 되지거라 직수불라베 데려와 소소다 드마드라 내가 첼 일이 차단게 시 내 소처바 마신 벌말로에 소소던다 체대던다를 지겨라 내 납신 로데 데려와 저 체대 소소 케메라지 주에 던다를 미겨도 망치어서도 어텔이야 소나 많이 벨레스 거라. 되게 냐와 예다 던도들게 레드래. 냐와 예다 던도게 레드라 소나 많이 벨레스라. 에트네 더벨하다 밀레케게 레도졸라 소남 벨레스라. 소남 벨레스. 더벨하다 밀레케게 레드. 소남 벨레스라. 네 미웨레스 줘라. 미외레세데 어디 something 순간벨라 레케지게 레다 숨미질라 케지게 레텔라 미외레세 거라 미와스도 something 당부르지나 다 something 당부도 람난 되게 마더라 something 당부도 가라서 신에 톱라돈 톱 로아 내가라주 단다 류다 롱주다 데베네다 류다 롱주다 강가 라과 견시지 삼당 거라 데베스메 라바시부치 셈치게 콘도가 제타도 마보트용게 로아 오 셈다 류드게 다도 강갈 껴다 그래 단당 알아서 통대게 수다티로데 제도 강갈 껴다 다음에 받아 동번이도 되게 공개어 말다 견세지도나 아 대야고레 뭐도 샤다 드바다 견사마야 삼르탄데 신샤촌르타라 근데 샤제 삼르탄데 코셴발로네 텔자니 신자 기요 말다 단당 알아서 내려 론지 소바사야 통일 소바타서 베트 마사란사데 마토 삼사르시게 자 어티인데 텔이야 가수라 영감바 견토네 데벤네 르론주 강가 셈다 강가리 견토네 신자 맹게 차도래 차방문주와 강사 당진다 뜻이 요하다 코견시지 따데르면 다음에다 동반이 삼다게 말해 어티치르네 코틸이야 차바다 드레선 데베 영감베네 르론주다 강가를 신자한테 차방문주와르치 내가 그런가 게임에 차서나 고체마 기도 할게 도래 개버세바 고발렘방 알아주데 센딜리치 여바딜리 신자요 말고 견도는 삼대 당불 할게 도라 어티인데 코티 삼대 당불 니르도 당유시스 띵지 템보 투여라 대전에 삼대 당불 할게 도 맞아 신달게요 말해 기나시 삼대 니버 숨바 시바테줄이야 공모마 오말릭도 때 고마 야르타기요라 내 송미도 저게 수코나 유튜브에 껴다겨래 남게선도 동사장장 삼루탄대요래 티치도네 수리야 벤더 차다 제도겨라 신자매게 저기요래 근데 송미 감사시도와 어때서 순간에 시다 송미 감시세 줘라 남가테 남시테 시시세요래 다들 럽통네도 만네도 도저 계제게 레들 미우엘레스그라 라랑 팀무 많이 받땡지 콤네티 라라케 티게 라라케 그마도 신다케요 말에 어디인데 그나가서 냐와 계제게 레르지네야 뇨르 친제야 밀케야다 미나네야 halake that in the toss of Chibata Jureyora, Cheton Jureo, Lesum Doa, Sungam Bacha, Dungam Sungam Sumi comes some chera, Dungam Delia Nyawa Yuda Tondul Kishik Leche, Mida Lala Kishik Leche, Tilla, Suna Maimbele, Chidilla Sunambule. Someday Tambu Niba Sumbata Sumilke, let to the Muele, things you come the care, or teach you land the Europe.
No,
No one more can got Chibata.
no. So here then the next states, furthermore, not understanding and incorrectly knowing reality is nescience, which is ignorance. And so here in what follows, we are going to be getting into the kind of description of the various types of conditioning factors or karmic formations. So here, just to back up, we have these three realms: the desire, the form, and the formless realms. So desire realm beings that include the 6 types of beings: hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, demigods, and gods, have this kind of strong desire for the objects of the senses, forms and sounds and smells and tastes and touch and so forth. And so therefore they are called desire realm beings. That is the name that is given to them. So then when we look at these realms of the 4 form realms and the 4 sort of levels of the formless realm, these are based upon developing a strong meditative stabilization. So the beings that are in these realms, like in the form realm, are referred to, are like deities, but they don't have the kind of coarse form that we have. So it's not, though, as though they have gotten rid of these contaminated aggregates. Rather, they are born in those realms due to this process of developing meditative stabilization. And then the formless realm involves not having a kind of physical form, and it is something that is developed, that is brought about through, again, a serious practice of meditative concentration, meditative stabilization. So when it comes to the kind of karmic formations that we create, those that are non-meritorious or unwholesome, lead to birth in the hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, or as an animal. If you do negativities within this life. So again, when we engage in negative actions, it's really just for the purpose of this life. Like we are thinking that we are going to get something, that there's some sort of like we have craving for various objects. And this is really referring to primarily engaging in the 10 non-virtues. Like if we think, oh, it'll help me if I lie right now, we do it because we think it's going to get us something good, or by being harsh to someone else, or by saying something divisive, by engaging in divisive kind of speech or gossip, whatever it might be. We are doing so with a kind of thought that we are going to gain something for ourselves in this life. And thereby we are accruing these unwholesome kind of karmas that will lead to those rebirths in the lower realms. Now, then there is a sort of meritorious karma, the karma that leads to rebirth as a human or a god. Those sorts of wholesome actions, the virtuous actions that we do, will lead to such a rebirth. Now, the karmic formations that leads to rebirth in the form or the formless realm is referred to as immovable. So and we won't get into all of this, but having attained like there are the 4 concentrations. The first concentration based upon having developed serenity and special insight. Now here, this kind of special insight is based upon seeing the faults of the objects within the desire realm. You see them as being really coarse, sort of like, oh, well, when you have desire for those objects, look at the kind of faults that come up. So they aren't meditating on emptiness or on selflessness, but rather this kind of practice leads to, by seeing those sort of coarser faults, it leads to an elimination of our manifest attachment and desire. But one hasn't eliminated the kind of grasping at a self that leads to renewed rebirth within samsara. So one has sort of temporarily suppressed those kinds of manifest afflictions and thereby takes rebirth in these particular concentrations or the 4 realms of the formless realm. And so when one has created the kind of karma that will lead to a particular rebirth in a particular one of those realms, this is going to be immovable in the sense that it's only going to lead to that particular kind of rebirth. So we have the 4 concentrations of the form realm, and then those of the formless realm, where one sees sort of the faults of even having form and attains these kind of mental states, infinite space, infinite consciousness, and so forth. And the kind of karmic formations that one has created will only lead to that particular rebirth. Whereas if one creates unwholesome, non-meritorious kind of karma, there are ways in which that could be variable. It could lead to a rebirth in the hell realm. Maybe you do a little bit of purification or something else, and one is able to have that take rebirth as an animal or something. So there's, and it's not set as to which realm one will take rebirth within based upon the kind of unwholesome karma or non-meritorious. Whereas what we see as immovable is you have created the kind of basis to be born in that particular of the form or formless realms.
Oh yeah. 당에 대로셔네 나오라. 셔야 대코나니 메토셔셔라. 다 토메 마르바시도 야들. 대코나니 메토셔셔. 네주터도데 동반이를 소바 다메발 소 메토셔. 로바르시데세 텔레 친질로다 다요바시데. 셰바데네 마르바시로. 대달 마르바요난 두치 넘버 숨 중데세. 이번 두치지레 넘버 숨 중그레셔라. Sumde karasa sunam so nyawar roas. Sunam so nyawar roas. Sunam sane roa. Le chumde la soba o kewa chimbata. Le chumde kewa sana drebu tewata mikewa chene drebu tunga yungre samne. Tende samlutane. Sunam so nyawar roa le sagre echera. Kewa sagre. Ti tendro lada milike ledra. Sunam mayimba nyawar roas. Sunam mayimba nyawar roa lede. Sende soso tandalia. Jirwandri mandrita chi kontunga gechi ngada tumasungal chi rimasu chi chasana. Na kanga bekewa chula sobata yungra. Sunam mayimba nyawarandwa. Sunam su nyawandwa ache. Sunam su nyawandwa de debela da miliki chigile tichera. Sunam mayimba nyawandwa asde nyawa yita tundru likishigile tichera. Mewa nyawa ndroa sido sungam da sungmigi hala kishigile tichela. Mewa nyawa ndroa. Le koran timu mayimba le resane. Shendal pa kiya yomar tiral kiyara. Ne? Tela sunam su nyawa ndroa duchi namle. Sunam su nyawa ndroa duchi sada mele kishigi kiwa mikiwa chupan kiwa chutuba richina. Sunam su nyawa ndroa number sheba yungre shara. Sunam mayimba nyawa ndroa duchi namle. Iban duchi ile sana mikiwa ile sabayina. Sendi tundali ara mikiwa ile sabayina. Sunam mayimba nyawa ndroa namshi yungre shara. Sumba namshi de. Mewa nyawa ndroa duchi namle se tingaji komne. Samde tambo da sungmi ji tingaji komba la tene. Sungmi da tingaji le ya kege le sa suna. Mewa nyawa ndroa duchi namle mewa nyawa ndroa sumba namshi. Ene suda sungmi le keji sumba namshi de. Yungde esi wara. Tene. Dine duchi li tenje nambar sheba she chaos. Tiba duchi lana. Iban duchi ji le la tene sumba namshi esi. Sunam su nyawa ndroa iban duchi le la tene. Ene tandevela da milike kyawandu kurese gora. Tiba duchi lana.
So again, not understanding and incorrectly knowing reality is nescience, which is ignorance. So being unaware of or actively misperceiving the way that ultimately things really are is then this factor of ignorance. And in that way, when ignorance exists, the threefold conditioning factors are produced. And so this refers to those leading to the wholesome, those leading to the unwholesome, unwholesome, and those leading to the immovable. So here, when based upon that initial ignorance, one creates various karmic formations, conditioning factors. If those are virtuous, are positive, or sort of wholesome, then that will lead to the wholesome, a good rebirth as a human or a god. And those that are unwholesome, so this is, the name is being given both to the kind of karma, the conditioning factors one creates, as well as the state that it will lead one to. So those kinds of actions that we do, really thinking about just this life alone, when it's like, oh, well, I didn't get what I want, so I'm going to lash out at this, or I need this, and so you crave, you grasp after it. You think that somehow you are achieving an aim. It's really just something for this life, but in that capacity, act with the various afflictions of pride and so forth, and thereby give rise to these kinds of unwholesome or non-virtuous karmic or conditioning factors, which lead to the unwholesome, a rebirth as a hell being, a hungry ghost, or an animal. And then those leading to the immovable, again, the karmas that are the kind of basis of meditative stabilization or meditative concentration that lead to rebirth in the form and the formless realms are unique to each of those kinds of levels of that. And so here, if we do something, again, going to the text, regarding that, from the conditioning factors leading to the wholesome arises just the consciousness leading to the wholesome. So again, by engaging in virtuous activities, those sorts of positive actions that will lead to rebirth as a human or a god, that leads to the kind of consciousness that is in that sort of wholesome state. And from the conditioning factors leading to the unwholesome arises just the consciousness leading to the unwholesome. So again, when we do something that is non-virtuous, negative, that is going to lead to a kind of unwholesome result. And then finally, those from the conditioning factors leading to the immovable arises just the consciousness leading to the immovable. So again, this kind of karmic formation conditioning factor will lead to the consciousness in that particular kind of state. And so this is called dependent on conditioning factors consciousness.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is Karsora. Never heard that until the Geshe letter. Let him tell a monk be married by one get so young. Tommy Mariba Tangin the Imbache. So let him tell a monk be married by one youngara. In a sonam junior Andrew letter, let him tell some latane. Oh, Neti Tibasana Kiwachima, Yabu young mare samche. And it sent it like Kiwachima Nigale, Pengimare, some Migo Chupa, Kiwachu to Giora. Kilendela Mongba Marwa. Lendela Mongbe Marube Wangyungo Mara, Tommy Marube Wangyungora. Or cheated Tommy Yasoni Kitchen, Sona Mindbelete. Tommy Maruba, you have a chaticalia, Lendela Mongbe Marubal Tanyongora. Send it on that ocean you got. Yasoni Kitchen Kuto. Had a military Kuto Kawachama Samlata, Jenny Titsochen Yongora. What did you learn?
So here, in the case of those kinds of unwholesome states, we have both the sort of initial ignorance, that grasping at a self, and then the kind of ignorance of karma, cause and effect, which leads one to really solely for the purpose of this life, engage in negative actions that are going to lead to rebirth in those sorts of non-virtue, those sorts of unwholesome states. Now, in the case of virtue, one has that initial ignorance of grasping at a self, but is lacking the kind of ignorance of karmic cause and effect. One recognizes that by engaging in virtuous and positive actions, one can take rebirth in a good, a kind of higher rebirth. And so those sorts of actions that are really just for this life, those negative actions that we engage in, have both the kind of initial ignorance in the 12 links, as well as that ignorance of karma, cause and effect. Whereas in the case of virtue, that ignorance of karma is not there. One has an awareness of that, but is acting in such a way as to gain a good rebirth in the future.
Oh, yeah. Don't get it. That number Sheba Henji Keba Pungbu Sujan Mayimba Shitase. Namshe Suba Namshe de Pungbu Sujan Mayimba Suji Pungbu Mayimbe, Sobo Chasa, Pame Kuta Mayingenge, Soan Dushi Samba, Tetu Yongorda, Soya Pumbu Dushibundu, Nambashi Pumbu Sigara. Sujan Mayimba Shita, in a Su Kayimba, in a Sobo Chaya, Sobo Monete Chazan de Chayo Marate. Kayimba, in a number Shibe Kenji Mingda, Suus, Mingi Pumbu, Sugi Pumbu Sinidua. Tingeji Shishajanira, the Sungam Sumili Kia to the Liana, then the Yana Juni Tandanga Zushaba Nasipanji, then the Yana Yomara, Tandanga Zungaji, Mitabu Shisha Cheshan, in the region some Tangoda. What is you, Lamna?
So then it says consciousness arising together with the four formless aggregates and the form aggregate are called dependent on consciousness, name, and form. So here, when it comes to then name, this is referring to those aggregates that are not physical, the kind of components of consciousness, feeling, discrimination, consciousness, and karmic formations. And then the physical, the form arises from the sperm and the egg coming together. And here, this is if we are sort of giving this presentation of the 12 links really from the perspective of womb birth, from the perspective of a human birth. Whereas taking rebirth in the form and the formless realms, this will not entail these 12 links following exactly each of them as sort of in the way that they go, given that there's not quite the same mode of birth.
Oh, yeah. That means that Suji can get Geshe True say. Geshe Trugi, Geshe Trubu, Dale Regbe Soto Shundes. That Geshe, big Geshe Navaji Nature, the Suda Suji take it to Siora, or to the Sosona. Geshe Trubu, the Dale Regbe Soto Shundes. Ni Yuda, Wangbo Namshusum, Sogbe Adela Rebas, made up by a teaching with Esera. Oh, Jenny. Then it gets a true change a repass, gets a true to your back change, and then you want them shoot some trebati with the Esera. Tell it, Danny, she does about Rekwa, that's so much on the Rekwa, and you don't want you so try to you don't want them, I want and Danny, near Rekwa Telea, Rekbet so true Yungura. She does Rekwa, that about so much on the sword, they want to get down to Yungura. Then the rebbe can get so say, you want Namshi Subu to travel then, and then so as you go, the rebbe can get so as a hours. What about the children?
So then, because name and form develop by means of the six sense bases, the performances of the functions occur. That is called dependent on name and form, the six sense bases. So here again, we have on the basis of having name and form, then the development of these six sense bases, which are able to act as like entryways for having contact with various objects. And then it says, from the six sense bases arise the six groups of contact. That is called dependent on the six sense bases contact. So here, when you have the coming together of the object, the sense power, and the sense consciousness, our six sense bases referring to those of our five kind of senses and then the mind, when those three come together, the object, the sense faculty, and the consciousness, it then gives rise to feeling. So whatever type of contact arises, that type of feeling arises. So here then where it says that, it is referring to when we have some kind of coming together, the meeting of these, then there's going to be the occurrence of feeling. And so whatever type of contact arises, that type of feeling arises. And that is called dependent on contact feeling.
Oh, yeah. That it's so much. That I don't know what you're told. But so that gave us a share. So it Cheta Teta Nyoa dance. So it Cheta in it, Dewata, soa dewa tungele soba nyonsuna, ane tele seba chigira. Soa dewa kesuna mendrawa seba, tunge kesuna trewe seba, trena sam seba chigira. O tende kasa, soya chitra teta nyawada, ta seba de shekdwa, dila kapsu seba dele shi shekdwa, o shi kata shekura soya chitra teta nyawada, seba chungu se, tambu dila, soya chitra teta nyawada, seba chungu che, ngobar kawa da seba dingche, ane lakbar shenpa da ane seba rabche, ane kasa lakbar shenen dukba rabji chos che, seba shishik da, seba chungu ding rabji chos, shishik da, o tichi lamna.
No. So here then we have just finished feeling, and so when we get to then it says whatever type of contact arises, that type of feeling arises, and that is called dependent on contact feeling. That which enjoys those types of feelings, that wishes, clings, and remains having clung is called dependent on feeling craving. Now here, sorry, there's actually 4 different classifications of that craving. So when it comes to, again, the 7th link is feeling, and then the 8th link is craving. And we have this kind of craving when there's something that appears as pleasant, as desirable to us, a craving to have that. When we have some kind of suffering, there's a craving to be free from that. And there is a sort of neutral craving in relation to those things which are neutral. And so here in this text, it actually sort of describes these 4 different kind of levels of craving. This sort of small craving, which I think is translated as enjoying, and then wishing is sort of a middling level of craving, and then remaining after craving. So again, we have this we could say enjoying, wishing, and then maybe craving and remaining after having clung. So these are like this sort of middling, low level of craving, kind of middling level of craving, really wanting something. And then there's like intense kind of craving, and this in craving that sort of remains having clung is sort of the highest level of that. So there are different sort of levels or intensities of craving.
Oh yeah. Yang dendrel lamnen dikatwa te chachu ni yungutwa. Oh di kase. Tambu de soya chitra tambu de. Soya chitra teta nyonga da se de. Dewa nyonga riyo sebal sha rawa. Ne nyonga da. Ngambar kawa da se de. Tungye nyonga sonsa tungye ta trena nyamdo memba tele char. Ene lakbar chi je se do te. Tanyum nyonga la sebati che. Ene te chema dele ya. Tamyo nyonga te ta madre na samba shi, tindel shi li cha ne tigdwa. Di tanda soya chira te ta nyonga ta ngabar kawa ta lakbar shenpa ta lakbar shenen dukba sa deli cha su nyi dwa. Chi tanda tamma lapsa yinba. Chi di tewa nyonga li ya shen chi chakwa che rwa. Ni tanyum tungye chung su ni tela tena samba ba che. Ni tanyum nyonga la shenpa che. Tanyum de ta madre na samba shenpa che. O tindel cha ne tigdwa.
So there is another way that one could parse these 4. And again, it's a little bit confusing in our English because it only seems to have sort of 3. But there is the kind of that which enjoys those types of feelings. So that enjoyment or kind of experience of feelings, we could say, is really the kind of craving for pleasure, for happiness. And then the second term, wishing, is wishing to be freed from those kinds of suffering situations. We have a craving that is a wish to be freed from whatever sort of suffering we are experiencing. And then the last 2 of like sort of intensified craving or remaining after having clung and not abandoning that clinging could be the third of those is referring to then the kind of neutral feeling and not wanting to be separated from that kind of craving for a neutral feeling. And then the last is wanting to be separated from that neutral feeling. So the kind of wishing to be, again, so we have the sort of enjoying, wishing, and then I think I will say remaining after having clung, and then because of not abandoning the thought. Those are the sort of four different types of craving that are referred to here and correspond with that wish for pleasure, wish to be freed from suffering, wish to have a kind of neutral feeling, and wish to be freed from that neutral feeling.
Tā tīngi jī kumdi yā tī chī nī chī tā tsua tāñyum tī yā chī gā rā. Tsua tāñyum tī. Tsua dewa tī tāmbu yōngyē lī yā samlu tā chī yā nyō tā māmbu yō rā. Tī tōp tsā su nī yā tī dējiñ mē yōngyē sam chī yā chī yā tī mē bā jū nī tūngyē ngō lī jūr gu rā. Tā kō ngā rā su dewa tī kā rā chī mā tō kō nyō tā tsā tā kāngyē māngā yō rā. Tāmbu tōp yā lī nyō tā yō rā, pār tū nē yā lī nyō tā yō rā. Tā mā jūr rā tā chū chū rā. Men jure tunge sigdo akora men kora. Ti samde tambuni ba ya amdu da so tanyum de ka chigora. So tanyum da men rewa sade. So dewa de sem truye me neba ma kegira. Tanyum de dewa me dunge me kora de na ti ya ga chigora. Sem de shida pa truye da me da yo ta su de nyo yo ra. Se tam kongme to so tanyum de ya chigora. O ti chi lap chena. Ngaranzo tin rabo chene ya bo re. Kashe kacho tu chocho yongdo to che choso kadaro che to che mandini pet tudaro chugdo kare na yongre sam thakburo che kukwa sore kasore te yagare yongre sam che shira chona tanji de yongda jo yabu chungsha de soro mada shira kache me she tubu chonsuna ata aka sa che mada shebu ma kumi de koe chunye Ramendra Kankal Yoya Yoresa, Koa Korsati, Yongure, Koale Tarnati Yongumare, some Kortone Yagora, or Gigilavia.
So here, generally, we in the desire realm hold pleasure to be good, right? Like a pleasant feeling is something that we enjoy, we want to have. But really, there is so much trouble that goes into getting a desired object. And then once we have that desired thing, the thing that we see as being pleasurable, there's all of the trouble that goes into keeping that. And then there is inevitably the change that will come, because that is the nature of things, that it won't actually remain. So we are going to have to face the disintegration, the loss of whatever it is we are craving for. So when one proceeds beyond that to the kind of level of those who are going to be born in the form or the formless realms, they see the defects of those sorts of pleasurable feelings and instead have a kind of craving for these neutral feelings. They have a liking for or a desire to give rise to those kinds of meditative stabilizations that are neutral, that having seen the sort of faults of all of that craving, like again, the trouble in getting the things that we want and keeping those things, and then having to face that inevitably they will change. This is the truth of the suffering of change. And so the less that we can have of the sort of disturbance within our mind that comes from that craving, that is seen to be better. Now, in general, we can see there are different types of people. There are those who are sort of really ready to give rise to like attachment to something, to wanting for something, to aversion for other things. But it's better if we can be a little bit sort of tougher, not to be quite so reactive to everything that comes our way, either sort of like wanting this or not wanting that in such strong terms. If we can instead think, you know what, this is the nature of samsara, that I don't always get what I want, or that I encounter unpleasant things, and thereby I'm not going to be so easily sort of led to crave for things or led to feel adverse to things. Instead, I'm going to sort of face the reality that this is the nature of samsara.
Oh yeah. That was it. That's why I can just say about this as well. The Noah, the Wambar Kawa, the Hawar, Shembada, Lakwara Shene Duba, Dube Ngoda, Tatama de Shesaswande, Dube Ngoda Yidua del Sura, and Nicare Teve Ngoda, Tower Majurci, Nyamdo Yonso Metonara, Chirshe, Lembate, Sebe can get Lemba Shektua, Lembate Tanda Tamaki, Sebatia Kerundora. Nyoa ta ngumbar kawa ta lakbar shenba ta se lakbar shenen dukba stal she tsara duk te tukbe ngo ta tewe ngo ta tewara majur chi se yaga te ta tewa te ta mate na samsa tinte yonsu metonga lakbar tu ya memba titni tile shuk chur tan ki war ta neshe memba te neste sibe kenji lemba she cha o se te dara ane möje yansiba kewe se ta te da chen ane chuba ka se keba se ko wala me chuba siba le de ro ke wa chima lan chu le te da möje yansiba kewe le lu da nga da yi ji ku ne lang ba te ne ane lembe kenje siba she cha o ten de wa chuba sibe le siba ke wa she te len che le so da ming ta do siba Kiwak Ming Tashar. Anikara Le Dele Kebe Pumbunga Nam Truba Kang Batene Sebe Kiwata Le Dewa Pumbunga Trubsuna and Kiwasigra, Kiwalambura. Kene Wamba Drube Pumbu Namji Pewa, the Pumbuna Kone Kondia Pene Pewa de Minsona Pewa de Apeda Shuna Tama Kuesa Lepsona Sura. Jibber you at any Kiwi can you Kawasigas. Yonsumi Badela, Kawache, and then Jig Badelia, Luda Semi Kagadosona, and Chua Jibber you at any Kiwi can you Kashishi Chawas, or Tiboto Chituna.
So here, continuing in this, and again, there are these four sort of levels or types that we can say, like enjoying, wishing, this kind of remaining, clinging, and then this thought that, and then not abandoning the thought of wanting or whatever it might be. So here, this can be, again, may I not be separated from the beautiful nature and the pleasing nature. This wish is called dependent on craving, grasping. So here again, when the kind of that increase of our craving leads to the ninth link of grasping, it sort of is a development of that. And this can be, again, the kind of craving that is not wanting to be separated from those things that you like, that you want, or the kind of craving that is wanting to be freed from a kind of suffering. In the context of here taking rebirth, this is this kind of craving for existence. And so this wish is called dependent on craving, grasping. And so again, when that craving intensifies, increases to a certain point, it is then given the name grasping. And so thus wishing, the karma that produces rebirth arises by body, speech, and mind. That is called dependent on grasping, becoming. So here, with that kind of strong, intensified craving, grasping, then that fosters the karma that produces rebirth, and this arises in dependence upon the karma that we have created with body, speech, and mind. And so dependent on grasping, becoming. And again, this is the kind of context of giving the name of the result to the cause. This karma that will lead to renewed existence is then called becoming. And dependent, so the obtainment, the five aggregates born from that karma, is called dependent on becoming, birth. So when that actually then brings forth, establishes the five aggregates of a particular life, that is called birth. The growth of aggregates produced from birth the maturation and the destruction is called dependent on birth, aging, and death. So here, aging, although it uses the sort of word growth, is really in the sense of continuing to decline in a way that our we will continue to just sort of develop throughout our life, but that the maturation there is referring to really a kind of decline, and so that is called aging. And then the destruction of those, as in when our body and mind necessarily separate, is then called death. So the growth of the aggregates produced from birth, the maturation, and the destruction is called dependent on birth, aging, and death.
Oh yeah. That tension Jabara Junga Yala Jungi Bondita Nesero. Ku Shanta Shale Chua. Ken Shanta Shale Chuas. Res T Karishegurasne. Kudake Meda Tenero. Kekudwa. Ku Shanta Shale. Ken Shanta Shale Tenechor. Tit Karishegurasne. Ku Mene Yungmarese. Ku Meba Mauto Marisungura. And Kuchik Janjan Lieutenant Chungres, Tambu Tambu, Chudi Chik Janjan, Kuchik Lieutenant David Kanga Chungres, Tis Mariscora, Kuchik Lieutenant Chungmara. No one Jula Soba, Chebabu, Loyo, I'm going to Tane, Tenikigres, Tia Youngbars. Kudan Tumba, Debu de Kejile, Kudan Tumba and Debu Kigramado, Kutakba Chik Janjan, taken Debu Kanga Soya Youngmarwa, Kumeba, Takbe Kudan, Kuchikna. Mitun Beku, Debuki water Mitun Beku, Takba in any Mitun Beku Chadura. What is it, Mare said to Dara? Kushanda Shanlecha, Keshanda Shanlecha Res. And Takba my answer. What did you love Shanadambo?
So thus, this 12-factor dependent arising, which arises from reciprocal causes and reciprocal conditions. So here, when it comes to this dependent arising, it is the result of many different causes and conditions. It's not as though there were a single cause that leads to all of these various results, nor is it the case that that cause could be something which is permanent. It is also not the sort of cause that is the intention of a god like Brahma or Indra. So this is refuting again that there could be this arising causelessly without some kind of a cause, or from a single cause, as in some kind of creator, or from a cause that is discordant, something like a permanent cause. But rather, all of it, dependent arising, entails that these arise based upon multiple impermanent causes that are harmonious with their particular result, and not just the sort of will or thought of a creator.
Oh yeah. The Takba Mayes, that Tension Jabara Jua to Kushanda Shan, Debu Shanda Shanda Shantan Kios, Taba Yonshin Marwa, Kishin Jigbe shooting at S. Kishi. Midaba Mayes said, Kundi Midaba Maris Herrera. Kundi Kichimato Metave Metaba Maris, Kundi Rubute Shora, Kichi Matu, Kundi Kichimato Metangetin de Marwa, Kundi Rubute Shora. Ke Deco, Kichi Rere Kundi, Urubute Shora. That did look Kundi Tabasigda, Garadu Jigdena Tabase Shora, Kotabaris Tegris, on Zambulin into the Taba Tegris. To talk to Negres at the Hoti Tabasigora, Kunji Tabasigdoatella. Kun talk to Netel, Tabas and Chicken Chitagua, Hoti Sugiara. Taba Maye, Mitaba Maese, Kunji Mitaba, so the Kichimato, Kun Kichimato Metega, Metube, Mitaba Maris at Dara. When I the Kichi Giora, Kundi Techora. I think I today Tonda Chamber to do Casura. Chiruba Dozuna Nambe, the Kichi Legina, Kichi Chicken, Jigna Saba Saba Kiguna, Chawachetu Maresagora, Lagada, Debuke, Chawachaloyo Mares, Kokejite is Chasara. 대견 조금 말해서 오라 균데 대거라 가라 딩아주 딩사 로드 야부도 로드 깨지 지게 와라 깨지 지게 맨날 로도 손도 마라 왜데 깨지 사와사바 요가라 이나 균데 대상 아주 이글로 토그레 강가 나고 멤버 세서 강가 체토고다 사코 대견 매바던 남버시는데 균데 좀 마신 버려세 깨지 이나 코소소소 자와체 토게 와라 야 어때 줄랍나
No.
가발레스라
So, then while indeed, okay, so, thus, this 12-factor dependent arising, which arises from reciprocal causes and from reciprocal conditions, is not permanent and is not impermanent. So we begin with the first of these terms, that it's not permanent in the sense that, again, there cannot be permanent causes and conditions that lead to impermanent results. And so, therefore, dependent arising is not permanent in the sense that there aren't permanent causes that give rise to somehow impermanent results or permanent results. But then the next says not impermanent. Now, here, this might sound a little bit strange, but this is really referring to a kind of continuum. So when we have a continuum, although moment to moment there is disintegration, there is change, the continuum can remain for a long time. So there is a continuity of that which is impermanent, in that these moment to moment sort of changes can lead to a continuum that is sort of ongoing, that is permanent, that is remaining forever. So here, if for the non-Buddhists, they would assert that you Buddhists, how can anything function if it is disintegrating moment to moment? How could there be any sort of causality or functionality whatsoever? And really, it comes down to being able to properly posit the existence of a continuum. So electricity is a good example. It seems like the light that is burning for us, it seems like it's steady, it's permanent, but really it is something that is moment to moment changing. I mean, if you just flipped on the light and it were just on and it didn't require pulling more power, you wouldn't have to pay for anything. But although that kind of steady light can remain, there is a moment to moment flow of that electricity. So here we should understand that where it says this 12-factor dependent arising is not impermanent, that's referring to the existence of continuum that can remain.
어띵 아주 처음에 빠야르시네 하고도 그 깨지 끼기라 놈다 되기 때문에 아마 멤버를 때때 말와 먹어제 놈 저서는 저도고도 전에 생각도 딸이야 로서 풍부도 소부도 사추메 롱중아도 단다 그 내가 제고도 알아서 선보 돼야 돼 우당야다 칼라사야다 나로도 따다 돼야다 시중한테 쉬어질 때고도 이제 그 때려때냐 선보체 돼고요 알아 계속 선보대야 들은 선보체 돼요 말은 알아서 계속 단다 대배수를 단다데 계속 내외수를 서르고도 그 말와 저 단다고 지기 사바 지기 야 선보체 규티 상거를 규마잖아 계속 규창한테 들은 팽 말와 어때 듣고 단다 야 끼기 와라 나마가 지기 제 치마 규티도 용거 알아 어디서도 가서라 깨지 야 깨지 말해서 되서라 그거 간가 규단 깨를 때네 거야 수수 어디 대고요 알아 규단 깨도 단다 저거 지대 그러면서 내만 규도 깨지 이거 되게 대로 지금 말와 우당고도 간가 제 단다 추도 칼라서 간가 제고도 사주 멜롱 좋아 나로도 간가 따다 내가 제고도 단다 될 때는 선부 대요 알아 그 깨지 거래 이나 균데 투제대도네 그야 저와제다 내가 제마트에다 또 용거 같다 어디서 그래
So here, like electricity or like burning a butter lamp or a candle, this is something that illustrates this in that, like, if we have a butter lamp burning, it's not as though the fire is just something that is remaining. It's not the same fire, but rather as that butter is burnt up, that flame is changing moment to moment to moment to moment. And so too, when it comes to the kind of aggregates of our body, we can function. We have all of these kinds of like there's so many conditions and necessities for life that are constantly changing, that are momentary kind of phenomena. And it is only when we have the aggregation of all of those kinds of causes and conditions coming together that we can remain alive. Now, we have this sense of permanence and like, oh, I'm the same person that I was yesterday. But it's not as though the causes and conditions that kept us alive yesterday are the same causes and conditions that are keeping us alive today. We have to have this constant flow of momentary kinds of causes and conditions aggregating in order for there to be life. But yet, there can be a continuum that remains. Without that kind of aggregation of causes and conditions, it would be cut. But in the case of, like, say, our being alive, there can be a continuum of this kind of body and mind, but yet it is dependent upon an aggregation of momentary, constantly changing conditions.
야 근데 이런 뭐 대그래서도 야 근생게 미다바체티 계시게 마주게시 요래 섬때 사요 말아 그 근세에 가르치 그래서는 그는 이마치 초주치 말에게 최미지나 그 근데 초주치 요라 대나 그 계시치 가르치 친소나 초주치 땡게 근직사라 까마치 차사라 까마니 차 까마치 근통통통통통로라 거직되거라 내가 반제 정도를 근시체 정부시가 얼마도야 근세지 미다버샤 뒤께지만 유게지 요새가 말아 어때 양심을 샤오는 그 치료받았는데 따와졌는데 계지만 인사들 뺏어요래 남바게 ngabukanga keji jidu wera sete konzo sebe mambo yorda tetene o de chiego de kesimbudo ya.
So here, this is something that is really important to understand, that we can have the continuum of something remaining, sort of being steady, but it changes moment to moment. So again, if we have like a butter lamp that is burning and it's going to be able to burn for an hour, the continuum of that will last for an hour, but it's changing moment to moment to moment as it goes by, a minute or in those kinds of increments of time. That is passing. It's not remaining statically, although that continuum has a particular length. So here it is important for as Buddhists, as opposed to those kinds of non-Buddhists who would assert that it's impossible for they don't understand properly how to posit continuum. Here, although it is changing moment to moment, or this is dependent upon moment to moment kind of causes, it is possible for there to be a continuum of something.
Oh yeah. 난 뒤제 많이 쓰고도 뒤제 많이 쓰도 직대기 제바복은 뒤제바 말해서 거라. 뒤마제 많이 쓰고도 라라게 교다 kenjiwange gyujingin du majeba mare du chebare segara ya kene gyumeba maese gyunyele gyuyongura kenmeba maes gyuda kenyokura tibodo julamna.
So here then continuing, it says again, thus this 12-factor dependent arising is not conditioned. So again, we have is not permanent, is not impermanent, is not conditioned. And here that is in the sense of being created by a kind of creator God, then not unconditioned in the sense that it depends upon causes and conditions, right? So it's not something that is unconditioned. So it is not without causes. This is dependent upon causes, and not without conditions. So again, causes and conditions are necessary for dependent arising.
Oh, 저는 영화 여바 마이스 Jidengi Chebabo Yube Wangi Tawa Tongela Soba Tendre Nyawa Yoba Mayensigora. Sebe Chu Mayensudu Rangi Kuta Kenji Wangi Ra. O Sebe Chu Mayensa. Sebe Chu Mayensa. Rangi Kuta Kenji Wangi ne Sokba de Jungri Esora. Gyun Sendu Marese. Rangi Kuta Tumben Debuti Jungri Esora. Sebe Chu Mayensa. Jigbe Chu Mayensa. Tiene Karsora. Oh, Jigbe Chu Mayensa. Karsora Sena. Judan Kenji Chokba Yoba Tisito Jungri Kendisiwara, Judan Kenji Chokwa Yoba Tisito, Ko Yungreswara, Jigweche Mayense. Namsan Kanga Mabcha Dumareswara, Judan Ken Chokwa Tisito, Keji Niba Niba Che Yungreswara. Gogbeche Mayen, Lamda Kameto, Ya teach Lapsana.
No. So here then it says, continuing with this list, not an experiencer, in the sense that this is not the result that is experienced from a creator having created all of these things. And then we have not a waning dharma. And so here, that's referring to the fact that as long as you have the kind of causes and conditions present, the continuum will keep going on. This isn't something that will sort of run out. And so this is similar to then not a perishing dharma, in the sense that as long as the causes and conditions aggregate, as long as there is that kind of coming together of the causes and conditions necessary for something, it will continue moment to moment to moment. Although that, again, is changing moment to moment, there's a continuum that goes through that. So it is not, therefore, a perishing dharma.
Oh, yeah. Gogbeche Mayensigwa, Korangi Mitimbe Church Chune, and a Mabachagramado, Korangi Koran Gogwa Mareswara. Pena Kujinda Chisan, Chimadine, Gajin Chunde Kotsodugara, Kinsoyate. Mado Koranji and Koran Mab Sosha Maresora. Mitimbe Gajin Chunde and Chipade Koran Gopacheva Maresora. Toma maybe tune Shubains. Toma Meba New York, Tendiana Junior Shisha and Shegiora. Toma Mebe tune Resora. You call Toma Yomarwa. Toma Maribal Toma Yomare. Joalaya Toma Yomarwa. Dear Kesha Buddha. Kasha de Manchaji, Toma Chiyoko, Toma Mana Duma, Toma Yona, Toma de la Juyo Mare Shegora. Chibabu Shagwatira, Chibabu Takwa, Yabuchi Codes, teacher. Tele Nambachana, and a Chibabu Chikira and Jimiko and a Chibabu Koranlia, Chibabu Suyo City. Dele Komara, Kotakwa, Juyo Mare Kiyora. So Nambachana, Jumangang over Chichi to Yona. The Kanga Jumeva Tuchora, Kaduina Tuchora. Juman and Meto Jiguna, Kabaina Meto Jechora. Chukadina Korma, the Chutan came men and over to Jumay Yoma Resura. Toma Karas, Toma Kayoma, Toma Manachoida. Then she then did Zambulin did Toma Yorvas and Yora, Tambu did it in this Chare, Sambata. She don't call out Zambulin that to change that to Toma Kayarati and Jelchi Yoma, Savachur Sechi Yomara. What did you love now? Go with your my Thomas.
So then continuing, it says, not a ceasing dharma, and in procession from beginningless time proceeds uninterruptedly like the flow of a river. So here where it says it's not a ceasing dharma, it's referring to the fact that phenomena don't cease by themselves or sort of by their own nature. But again, it is either through the lack of proper causes and conditions for their continuation, or some sort of opposing factor that phenomena come to cease. There is this kind of, again, a continuum of similar moments following after one another. And it's not as though by themselves, of their nature, they will come to a kind of cessation by themselves, but rather, as it says here, it's not a ceasing dharma. And then it refers to it being in procession from beginningless time. So here, this is an important point that Buddhists don't assert that there is some kind of beginning cause. Now, when you look at other kinds of traditions that assert a creator who is somehow permanent and the creator of all of the world and the beings within it, if you go to them and say, well, what was the cause of that creator? Who made that creator that then created all of these other things? They'll say, oh, no, that's permanent. He's always there. And of course, then this would run into the problem that if you have a permanent creator, they would always be creating things, or they would never be created at all. Or if you're trying to assert, on the other hand, that somehow phenomena arise causelessly, then, I mean, you don't need a seed or water or anything. You could just have a flower. It would just come into being, randomly creating these kinds of things. Now, for the Buddhists, they would say that there is no sort of beginning initial cause that one can point to. When it comes to like this specific world system, we can say, oh, these are the kind of causes that led to the development of this world. But in terms of the very beginning kind of cause, that isn't something that could be posited, either of like consciousness or of atoms, particles, and so forth. That's not something that can be posited.
Oh yeah, that game I chebar. Lungi gyushin do cheso. Shuka also. That tension debar jonga de koya ta te to samade gyunche yo mare sora. Kache bodo yungresene lungi gyushin. Nyangde. Fumbu langma mebe nyangde deba tachomba. Nyangde mato bado ko tende ya la chungi de. Aje kwa de yongde ro. Nyangele debe mato be patele. Ne yongde re sigora. Tenjin debran jowa yangla chungye bonde dane, kyu shanda shanle chunga, kien shanda shanle chunga, so te chulam nan de ya.
So here again, in a procession from beginningless time proceeds uninterruptedly like the flow of a river. And so here this kind of procession of causes and conditions will continue uninterruptedly, like the flow of a river, until remainderless nirvana, until one, as it explains in one of the commentaries, until reaching that point of nirvana, one will continue, this uninterrupted flow of the 12 links of dependent origination will continue. And the only sort of stopping point is then with the achievement of nirvana.
Oh yeah. That takwa ma yin sigdwa. Juro mebe tende ma resche. Ane midaba ma yin se de odirda. Gyun de keji ma do te medum gege. Sora gyun de jumbu de meba midaba tende ma resche. Ane duje ma yin se de longo do tande jide cheba be longo do tande cheben du cheba ma resora. Dumaja ma yin se de judan gen chokbala tene gyujin du ma cheba ma resora. O dichilona.
So again, we have this long sort of list, and it says, well, indeed, this 12-factor dependent arising, which arises from reciprocal causes and reciprocal conditions, is not permanent. So again, it's not something that is permanent in the sense of being unchanging and not subject to causes and conditions, nor is it not and it is also not impermanent in the sense that although a continuum is changing moment to moment to moment, that continuum itself is not momentary. It is something that remains. It's not impermanent in the sense of we can posit a continuum that remains. And then where it says not conditioned, that is again not conditioned by a creator God, by the kind of will of some sort of creator. And then not unconditioned in the sense that it's not something that is completely uncreated. It is dependent upon causes and conditions. So it's not non-dependent upon causes and conditions.
Oh yeah. That you meba my can meba my that you do. Nyoa yoba my suit. Cheba be wange ne tawa dongela soba nyoa. Into yoba my resevora. Nyoa yoba my said. The sebe chu my say. Rangi kudan tumben Drepung jungre. Namsa said do my res. Rangi kudan. You na kudu yo bado kudu that tumben Drepung karina jungre. Chick in anything said do my res. Jigbe che ma yinsa, chi si tu kien soba di si tu jungye che si gora. Jigbe che ma yinsa, gyung do tinte te ko namsa da jigni pecha meo chak ma re se, gyung do to. Chi si tu kien soba di si tu drebu de yana yado, chi jung san ni gyung shen ta kie meo tinte ma re se, gyu da kien soba di si tu koran drebu de da tumbo de yon de re si gora. Ya, ti chi lamna.
So this is not without causes and not without conditions. That's fairly straightforward. And then not an experiencer in the sense of there being some kind of creator who bestows upon us happiness and suffering. And then not a waning dharma or not a perishing dharma refers to, not a waning dharma refers to the fact that as long as you have a cause, it's going to bring about its similar result. It's not as though there's a kind of cutting of the continuum. When we have that sort of cause that has the ability to bring about a like result, it will do so. And then where it says not a perishing dharma, this is again referring to the fact that there can be a continuum, that there can remain the continuum of that cause bringing about a similar, a like result. And that kind of continuum is not something that is just sort of cut off and ceases.
Oh yeah. Gogbe che ma yinsa, si karsuwa sana, drebu de jungalia mitumbe, Genji chone ya chondo ando karine chi chone ene jigdo de mato chige kurang go ma reswara gogbe chemaye ya tijulam.
So, and then where it says not a ceasing dharma, sorry if I used that in the past one, this is referring to phenomena not having a kind of inherence of ceasing themselves. Rather, it is only due to a lack of proper causes and conditions or a kind of opposing cause that something will come to cease.
Oh yeah. Thoma mebe tune shubase. Tende je chede dalia thoma yo mares kwa kane tambo kane kore kewa tambo kadu lara thome maruwa tambo kadu chorti tal mege tende yo mares gora. Thoma mebe tune shubare segora. Karasne kola thoma yo mares. Yeah.
And then here, where it says, and in a procession from beginningless time, this is referring to the fact that the beginning of samsara is not something that one can posit. This is asserted to be beginninglessly. So, and in procession from beginningless time.
Oh yeah, kyun ma cheba lungi kyun shin tu jongire se de kwa de sigora tende yala chen ko kwa ko chute. Te nyangele de ba top top ba do yongire sigora lungi so.
So then this proceeds, uninterruptedly proceeds like the flow of a river. So one will have the kind of continuation of this until the point of reaching nirvana, until the point of reaching that final cessation or that state of nirvana.
Oh yeah. Oh lungi kyun shin tu che su shu me je si yongire sora. Yan yang la shi o de de ta sabar. 언제 양라 시부 데다 내서도 다 양라 시지 시도 텐전 레버를 줘야 양라 종이부 데다 도와를 잡에 교로 다 양라 종이데 소지 되샤네야 신날 소 되네셔요 레송 거라 시리 가래서나 데다데 마릭바티 치자로 ene sebade chicha ene leche number sheba she o te shin dal tu gre chara te kandes tu gre sna chala nam ya ti chula na.
And so, again, this uninterruptedly proceeds like the flow of a river. Still, these four factors proceed by being the cause for the function that assembles those 12 factors of dependent arising. So if you sort of condense or distill down the 12 factors of dependent arising, they could be summarized in these four. And what are the four? They are ignorance, craving, karma, and consciousness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This one. Tell a number sheba ne. Sabunje Ranshingi Chuchetos. Number sheba de Namshe de Kiwalaya Pike Medatandu Karachaneti Namshe Sabun Nashingi Legachigres ora. Le Karasa Nyawa Yada Tandu Kawachigina Susame Kawachigina Shingana Shingi. Sun Dabsa Shingana Shingi Legachigres ora. Shingi Ranshin Chuchetos. The Marikba Seba Sura. Marikba da Keba Seba Kuba Lebatus Gera. Oh, Nyomobe Ranshin Chuchetos. Nyomoge Ranshi Chunashi. Sabin le Chutavanashi take Chuchigres. Tell le da Nyomobata ne Sabin number Sheba Keto se. Leda Nyomobawage ne Sabin number Sheba de Akibar Chigres. Tell le ne Sabin number Sheba Shingi Chavachi, Lady Shingna Shires, Seba de Chava de Sigora Keba Seba Kubalmunda, Seba ne Sabin number Sheba, Lembe Chavach, Chuna Shavachi, Maribane Sabin number Sheba, Deb de Maribade, Sabin Tamge Nashigi, Tome Maru Kunelane, Lesa Kankachigora, or Chisa Maribane Sabin number Sheba, Debe Chavachi. Ken deda mena sabin number sheba ngomba dubar minjuro so dezo mena ane sumba namshe de kyawalange de duptu mare so tiba tochi danshan dikdo.
So, thus, consciousness is the cause with the essential nature of a seed. So, our consciousness acts as like a seed, and karma is the cause with the essential nature of a field. Whatever kind of karma that we create to be born in the hell realms, hungry ghosts, animal, human, god, so forth, is like the nature of a field, the sort of field. Ignorance and craving are causes with the essential nature of defilement. So when one has these causes and conditions, then that's going to produce rebirth. And so regarding that, karma and defilement produce the consciousness that is a seed. So again, based upon having that kind of ignorance, defilement, and karma, then that acts as the sort of way that one produces this consciousness that is a seed. And regarding that, karma performs the function of a field for the consciousness that is a seed. So this seed of consciousness is like planted in the field of karma, and craving moistens the consciousness that is a seed. So ignorance sows the consciousness that is a seed. Ignorance is like what's planting, what's sowing that kind of seed of consciousness in this field of karma that is then moistened by craving. And so if these conditions do not exist, the consciousness that is a seed will not be produced.
Oh, I think this one. I did it. I didn't much about it. I tell a legend, Cheba. Loyo Akoma Rese, Kuji the Son and Digamato, Juden Chebabu Kulumena, and a Chavache took my research ora. Satan Chutu to the Semiomare, Considerable Ketomare, the Ketchungang Kulunji called research ora. 어떤데 거 말해서 규진 소는 저 게임 그러마도 되게 그 삼상의 제바 보이는 수나 군로디 거 말해서 거라 이던다라 telā lējiān dīnyam dō jebā mēbē kēnshē, yuwa mēbē kēnshē ora. Lējiān dīnyam dō sabi nambar shēba, shingi chāwa nyam dō nyam mēsē rō. Sebāyān dīnyam dō sabi nambar shēba, lembar chāwa nyam mēsē rō. Maribāyān dīnyam dō sabi nambar shēba dō Thabkhe yīnsā, sōn Thabkhe nā shī chī yīnsā. Kīwa ngā. O dēshā. Yā, o tēw chīlam nā.
Yes. So here, then again, this is followed by something that we have sort of heard, a similar kind of sentiment that has been expressed before. So it's not the case that there needs to be some kind of like will or movement of mind, but rather when all the causes and conditions are complete, this will come about. So without that, it will not come about. So regarding that, it does not occur to karma. I perform the function of the field for the consciousness that is a seed. It does not occur to craving. I moisten the consciousness that is a seed. And it does not occur to ignorance. I sow the consciousness that is a seed. It does not occur, and it does not occur to the consciousness that is a seed. I am produced by these conditions.
Oh yeah. Sabi number shebayan dinyam do ta ne kendi da. Drebu dege nga kyu dege ke son samlo ke ko marese. Jebabu lo yo ko marese ta danda. Sabi number shebayan dinyam do ta ne kendi da ke son nyam do mesim so. Ja. Sabi number sheba sabi number sheba leje shingla temba. Seba ge len chune shingi lemba. Marikbe ne luji, marikba di lu na shi chagdwa. Selu lu jaya yorwa tilia. Tidigu chire. Luji chen chedo. Kewa ne kewe ne nyinzam chorwa. Maya nge, kewa ne maya nge to nyinzam chorwa to chawa chedu resi wara. Maya nge teta tere. Suji nyugo ngomba trupte. Minda sugi, o tiba do chilam na. Ngomba trupte ese bata.
So again, it does not occur to the consciousness that is a seed. I am produced by these conditions. There doesn't need to be this kind of will or thought of a creator. However, when the consciousness that is a seed, which is supported on the field of karma, watered by the moisture of craving, and planted with the fertilizer of ignorance. So here it's not so much the way that we put fertilizer on, it helps to germinate that. And then based upon that, it germinates. Then the sprout of name and form is produced in this and that mother's womb, the place of birth, reconnection. And so yeah. No.
Oh yeah, that's
No, so we're going to stop there for today as we have run out of time. So we'll finish there.
Thank you for your beautiful commentary, Ginla. And thank you for your translations. We'll see everyone online again next Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We'll finish with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losong's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandiryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, yeah.
Recording stop.